Hello everybody, Chris here from Truly Holistic. In this video, it's going to be a demonstration of the process of how we go about a reality coaching session. At Truly Holistic, yes, we have a number of different session options, for example, working on spinal alignment posture correction. But for the generally, the two main sessions are one that's more clearing based, which is a healing session, a quantum ascendance healing session, and the other one is more not clearing work, but to provide insight and wisdom, which we call reality coaching session. And it's a great platform for somebody to come to that have got questions about things they're experiencing every day, reality itself, the fabric of reality, maybe just what's going on in the world, and just wanting some clarity, some certainty to that situation. Because I always say to my clients that when we have a greater level of knowing or understanding, that can provide the healing you're looking for. Because I'm a big fan here at Truly Holistic of emphasizing, because this is for me being authentic, is emphasizing that the key is you in regards to healing yourself. Okay, because your life, your reality, is a byproduct of your own momentary process. How you apply yourself, through the choices that you make, but also, what are you becoming an extension of, a medium of, is very important, because that means your creative ability is forging creation. Is it forging creation that supports you, or is it supporting something else? So all of this is very essential and very important. So far, all the clients that have come to me at Truly Holistic and invested in reality coaching sessions have loved it, right? Many times they've gone, wow, at the end of it, right? They're just blown away by, how it eventuated, right? That 45 minutes. And sometimes, yes, they will bring things forward to as questions, things, focuses that we want to explore. But for the most part, a lot of them like to keep it open-ended and want to go with the flow. And generally, the ones that go with the flow are a journey that we take together, myself as well as the client, because we start to forge terrain that a lot of the times I'm learning a lot from it too. And that's the cool thing about being, often I talk about the difference between being a medium and being intuitive. And for me to be intuitive and be instinctual is to facilitate our authenticity through this medium. So a lot of the times when we're got an open-end session and we're really exploring very deep levels of the understanding of how realities, the fabric of reality is forged, and also a role within it, things are coming through me that I'm experiencing for the first time too, and blown away by it. Because it's not thought, it's not preconceived, none of that. We don't use thought mentality, which generally is how we are conditioned and taught to use as a human. And that's why our experience of reality is greatly limited. At Truly Holistic, what I use and what I recommend to my clients, because this is not only going to provide a more expansive experience, which means greater level of knowing and understanding of their reality, but it's also going to provide the very materials, energy that the body needs to heal. So it's all the same path, right? A greater knowing of our reality and of oneself, but also providing a state and environment that allows ourselves to heal and remedy any health problem. Same path. So let's get into it. Now, this wasn't directly from a reality coaching session with a client, but often, as I'm doing sessions, I'm writing notes myself, right? Because I like to have it in front of me so we can bring all these parts together, which I always say to my client are like pieces of a puzzle, and bring them together, right? To showcase us the bigger picture, how everything's connected, which is, again, insight, right? A greater level of knowing and understanding of what's going on. And as I say, a lot of the times that's what clients ultimately need to heal. If we just keep doing clearings, with little insight or knowing of what that clearing is and also why it has to be done, which is directly connected to the client's own momentary process, well, there's a good chance that they might remanifest that issue. But if you have a greater level of understanding of how you apply yourself and also this reality and how it's forged and created, including your experience of perhaps having an illness or having PTSD or trauma influence you, then all of a sudden it becomes just a higher level of self-enlightenment and self-empowerment, that all of a sudden when we do that clearing work, that's how it remains, right? And you can grow and evolve forward. So often I write things down. So in this case, there was a lot of things that I wanted to take to the chart, right? And ask my, I guess, higher aspect of ourself, which we call a soul consciousness, which navigates the sessions with my clients, navigating my process. Because I can't rely on me as the human, what I've been conditioned to think and use mentality, because that's all based on keeping me in the dark and limited. You have to use a different avenue, and that is to facilitate a part of me that's not bound to the conditioning and not bound to the limitation to gain those insights. So I've got a whole lot of notes that I presented myself, and a whole lot of answers came through, and this is what this video is going to be about. Very much like if I had a client in a reality coaching session. So I've got some notes in front of me. We're also going to show some visual representations, which of course are not shown in the session, but hey, let's make this a little bit more fun. So one note I wrote was, is what's the association with DMT and melatonin, right, in regards to the pineal gland, right? Because a lot of people take drugs or substances in regards to DMT to have a psychedelic or spiritual experience, okay? And and this is associated with activating or opening one's pineal gland or third eye. And talking about this session insight, right, which means a greater level of knowing or understanding. This is quite often what I call, and this is what my soul consciousness calls, the pineal gland, right? Science, medicine calls it a gland, a pineal gland that secretes a hormone called melatonin. The ancient spirituality consciousness realms, they call it an eye because it's got photoreceptors, and we'll get to that in a minute. I like to call it insight because our place of attention is super important, right? As I mentioned before, right? Our momentary process is how we apply our attention, how we use our intention, right? Because they're the only two choices that are bound and connected to every moment. They are a constant that we can't get away from. So the more we learn about that, the more we're self-aware about that, the better, because that supports us instead of working against us, right? So when we look at our place of attention, it's a matrix. It's a triangle, essentially, a pyramid, which is based on the two eyes to see and the one eye to know, right? Which is our third eye. Now, one eye to know, right? A greater level of knowing is the word insight, yes. But these two eyes, right, to see are on the outside part of our head to see externally. So we could say it's there for external sight. Now, the pineal, right, the third eye is embedded in the head. So it's more your inner sight, but we shorten that down. It's your insight, okay? This uses sight, this uses feel. And this is why the third eye or the pineal gland is a dance partner to the heart, because it's part of the sense of feel. And why that's important, because feel is something that has no boundary or limitation applied to it. This is why I want my clients to learn and become familiar to discern what they experience from the heart, because you're not limiting yourself, right? Because when we limit ourselves, we limit then how we apply and create our energy. So it's a bit like we're going to play darts, but the lights are switched off and we're hoping that dart is going to hit the spot where we want it. But the most likelihood it's not. But when we use heart and we use our pineal to guide us through feel, then all of a sudden, all the lights are on and we can see directly where we need to go. Right? So let's get into it. So we want to look at the difference between DMT and melatonin, right? Now, you might be familiar, obviously, with pineal gland, the secretion of melatonin, maintaining of melatonin to initiate sleep and maintain sleep, right? And dream state and all those sorts of things. So all of a sudden, when I looked into DMT, well, the M within DMT, M means methylation, methyl, right? And we know methylation a lot here at Truly Holistic because in the broadcasting system, we use a supplement, the two supplements we use the most. And again, I'm not giving the person the physical supplement, we're presenting the energy signature of it, right? Which is the foundation of anything physical. And we can do that, right? It's easy. Now, the two supplements we use the most is betaine and MSM, which is methyl sulfonylurea, right? So it provides a methyl group to the body to support the process, which is called methylation. Now, methylation, it's got many avenues of effect on the body, but the one that we focus on at Truly Holistic is that methylation is the body's natural pathway to cleansing and detoxification to the body. And when we talk about cleanse or detoxification, what that means is bringing flow to an area that once was congested. And why that's so important is because flow is everything, because illness cannot be present when everything in the body is flowing. When there's a state of flow to the body, you cannot be illness. Illness is due to either a congestion, obstruction, or blockage to that flow. So that whole topic of whether your field, your energy, or the blood, or the lymph, your physiology, whether it's flowing or not, is very pivotal and very important. Very simple in nature, but it tells us a lot, okay? And so when we are providing something that is a methyl donor to support methylation of the body, that's going to be beneficial for the body, right? So MSM's that. Betaine is also a methyl donor. Things like methylcobalamin, which is a type of B12 that's connected to a methyl group, again, supports methylation. So it was interesting that the M in DMT stands for methyl. Now, there are in chemistry, there's structural similarities of DMT and melatonin, right? So that was something that when I went to Google, that's the information that was presented to me. Now, so it said, due to the structural similarity of DMT and melatonin, it has been proposed that the various dreaming states and even near-death experiences, now that's important, may be explained through elevated levels of endogenous, that means within, the DMT in these situations. So immediately, when I got into my chart, right, I was like, okay, my soul consciousness come through. I'm a conduit to it, and intuitive to that process, because sometimes when we throw that word medium out, you don't know who you're medium to. We need to be connected to what we are. That's very important. And the information that came through, it first circled the word endogenous because it said the gateway of the heart, because that's what facilitates the soul. We've just talked about how important that is. The gateway of the heart is endogenous because we're bringing something that we already have from within ourselves, right? Our pathway, our guide to gaining greater insight and knowing, and getting the singularity, which we can say is answers, is not above our heads. It's not outside of ourselves. It's within ourselves. Okay. Very important. Okay. So endogenous means having an internal causal origin, right? So internal, within. Now, the interesting thing, what came through, dreaming, right, which is a sleep state, we actually go back within ourselves to where we originally come from, which I call the quantum. Okay. Now, this is very important because I often say to my clients, where we go when we're asleep, because our role when our eyes are open is to use our attention, right, to forge reality. But of course, when we go to sleep, right, when the pineal secretes enough melatonin, which melatonin is light that comes from the quantum, by the way, our eyes close. Our role is not here to forge or create reality. It's actually to go back to where we come from, right, as a consciousness, a soul consciousness. And I often say to my clients, when we go every night, we go back to the same place of where we will go back when we eventually die. Okay, so isn't that interesting that they connected that dream states and even near-death experiences? Now, I'm going to show you a visual representation of what that looks like. Right, we call this the ascension map, and again, if you've watched a lot of my videos, this comes up all the time. Now, that tree, right, it's depicted as a tree. That's a representation of where you come from, the quantum. Okay. Now, we're currently Earth, right? So that generation 3, and generation means reality or universe. Okay. So when we're awake, right, our eyes are open and we're experiencing life, we're forging reality, and that's generation 3, that's Earth. When we go to sleep, we go down that branch and we go into the main trunk of the tree, right, which is the quantum. Okay. Now, this is interesting because when we're asleep and we're having dreams, this is why dreams feel like they're relevant, but they're a little bit weird and different at the same time, is that we are then counsel or a guide to versions or variants of us that are living in other realities. That's generation 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. Our energy signature, which is another way my soul calls itself as the soul, is spliced amongst multiple realities, right? With the purpose to amplify its ability to grow and evolve, right? For that tree to grow, to expand itself, right? So when we're awake, then some of those other variants of us, when they're asleep, they become our counsel and guide, right? That's our oneness. That's really our oneness in what we infinitely and authentically are. Because as a human, it's like putting on a jacket for a day. It's not really what we authentically and infinitely are. Okay. So essentially, my soul consciousness said, yes, DMT and melatonin are the same. It's just simply different interpretations, just slightly different interpretation of each other of it. Okay, let's keep moving. Now, there was an aspect of, people take magic mushrooms, right, for that psychedelic experience. So I wrote a note, how does taking DMT or magic mushrooms, right, in which the magic mushrooms, the primary psychoactive chemical in magic mushrooms is, hopefully I say this properly, psilocybin, which converts to psilocin in the body to produce its effects, right? Now, what we found was it was a tryptamine alkaloid. Now, this is important because tryptamine sounds like tryptophan. And tryptophan is on the same pathway that then eventually becomes melatonin. We'll get there, okay? Right, it's an alkaloid. A lot of medicinal compounds are alkaloids. So I said, how does DMT or magic mushrooms connect to experiencing psychedelic experience? Right. Now, what came on my chat in reply to that was that, yes, tryptamine is tryptophan, and that, tryptophan goes through a process where it becomes serotonin, and then serotonin becomes melatonin, right? And as I said before, melatonin is light that comes from the quantum. Okay. This is why, again, as I say, when that disconnect of the third eye, right, the pineal, if that gets disconnected from its dance part of the heart, then you're going to get sleep problems, insomnia, right? Because the heart is what got you here from the quantum. It's the bridge that bridged you from the quantum and having an experience here, right? Again, bringing this back up, right? That borderline between the green and the white, right? That bubble of the earth, generation 3, and that branch, that's the heart. The heart's the singularity, right? If you look at a wormhole and you look in the middle, there's a singularity, and there's two ends, right? Two openings on two ends. The singularity is the heart, right? So we want the heart, the field connection, to bring and activate that third eye, that pineal, and make it relevant, right? Is very important in regards to, yes, creating enough melatonin and keeping that up so you sleep during the night. Okay. Now I'll show you what there, right? So there's the bit of chemistry in regards to tryptophan that then, when it goes hydrolase, that's an enzyme, okay? So it goes through an enzymatic Callis reaction that changes tryptophan to serotonin, just to keep things simple in regards to chemistry, and then the next switch to melatonin. Now, isn't it interesting? It shows here also light coming through the eyes and sun, because the Latin name for sun is sol, right? And what does the heart facilitate? The soul, right? And yes, it's spelled differently. S-O-U-L, that's soul within, right? Our light, our consciousness, and then sun, Latin word for sun, soul, S-O-L. But there is a direct connection between soul and the sun, and there's a direct connection between the heart and the earth. When we start to see the bigger picture of what reality is and how it's forged and so on. Now, pineal gland, yes, it has photoreceptors, hence it's an eye, right? The ancients always called it an eye, right? And then when medicine had a look at the pineal, wow, it has photoreceptors in it, right? Now, there are a lot of people that really embrace sun gazing, right? And that's why I'm going to keep this visual representation up here, because it's only safe to look directly at the sun when, the first disc or two when the sun's rising or sun setting, right? Otherwise, I do not look at the sun directly, okay? It will destroy your eyes, okay? You'll go blind. Now, when you do that, right, you directly look at the sun, right? Sun gazing. A lot of we're talking about light, right? What did I just say melatonin is? Light from the quantum, and the quantum is where you as a soul consciousness comes. And what is the Latin word for sun? Soul, right? The origin of everything's not outside of us. The origin of everything is within us. We are the projector. That is the projection. This is very important to note, because the way we're taught as the human through mind thought mentality, which is to keep us limited and in the dark, right, as people perceive as keeping us locked up in the matrix, is the belief that our origin is everything outside of us. Because what does the mind do? It externalizes our viewpoint on reality to the point where we start to believe that life happens to us instead of realizing we are life and we are here to forge it. So sun gazing, really good, but not as good as when we go within and we go back to the origin of everything and greater understanding of that, because the sun is a projection, not the original projector of the light. Now, a lot of people have said over the years, right, if you want to recalibrate yourself, right, people that travel so many time zones, right, and they want to get rid of jet lag, they always say, find a place that you can do sun gazing, take your shoes off and go barefoot on the earth. Because when you earth, right, earthing, the technology earthing and the science that's shown, what that does is it connects you with the authenticity of the earth that allows you to connect into your authenticity, is to get you into the heart. That's ground. That's your original ground, because that's where you come from, through the heart. The heart got you here. Okay, so when you couple that up with then looking at the sun through the eyes, which goes straight to the pineal, you're connecting those dance partners together, right? As I say, heart and the pineal, or the third eye, were inside, right? Again, a lot of people talk about that, but not to the level where we bring those pieces together as I'm presenting to you now. So what it said when I hit the charts, a lot of people like to do sun gazing with grounding, earthing as the heart and the pineal, or the dance partners. As I explained there, when sun gazing, we are connecting to the projector that projects the soul, which is the soul. Is sun, soul, right? Now, so coming back to this, right, tryptophan, serotonin, and melatonin are interconnected through their roles in the body's chemical processes. Tryptophan is an amino acid, essential amino acid. So a lot of people perceive it as something you dietary need to get. Now, I've got to really explain this in greater. Let's take this out. If you are allowing mind, thought, mentality to forge your process, which means you close off your heart, okay, and you're up here, because when we're up here, our infinite nature is closed off, which means then we've got limited insight, limited knowing and understanding of how all the pieces come together. And we've also got a limited amount of energy, and also we've got a limited amount of flow, which then creates congestion to the body and illness and all these other things, right? So it's all detrimental. Then we believe in the mentality that the mind gives us, which is that we lack. And hence we believe we need to get everything through diet, right? And hence diet becomes a pivotal thing. Am I getting this? Am I getting that? Am I getting enough vitamins? Am I getting enough minerals? Everything's compartmentalized because that's how the mind makes it look like, right? Is to break all the pieces, take the whole and break it all into pieces, which then we lose sight of how all the pieces come together. It's a completely different game when you learn to discern reality from the heart and lead by the heart and get the heart open. Because when you get the heart open, right, and you facilitate everything you are, that tree, you are facilitating spectrums of frequencies that are the foundation of every nutrient, every mineral, every element, every vitamin there is. The foundation, the baseline. So when you can facilitate that, do you think that diet all of a sudden becomes an important aspect? No, not as much. Because you're facilitating the foundation of everything the body needs just through presenting your natural state, getting the heart open. So when they say, oh, yeah, tryptophan, that's something you have to get from diet, well, it's a different game when you get your heart open. No. You've got the foundation of what creates tryptophan in the body now that bypasses it, the need to get it from something dietary. So it's pretty cool. Right, back to it. So, yeah, as it say, tryptophan is an essential amino acid that serves as a precursor for serotonin, right, as it shows here. And serotonin is known as a neurotransmitter, right? We'll get to that. And understand that also serotonin, right, is very much aligned and connected to mood. So it's often, when somebody gets depressed, right, or depression, they find for the most part that person's lacking or low in serotonin. Okay. Now, remember this pathway is about light, right, which is another word for your consciousness, soul consciousness. Do you know what we find is really the cause of depression, of any mental illness? Is a disconnection to your authenticity as a soul consciousness. Why? Because we're up here in mind, thought, mentality, and we're not opening the facilitation of what we are as a soul consciousness. And we use mentality from the mind. Any word we use, mental health, mental illness, mental body, mental this, it comes from mentality. Now, when we're in our heart, we feel our way and we discern our reality and who we are and everything around it from the heart, we don't use mentality. Meaning, we cannot forge or create a mental health or illness problem, right? Because depression is due to a disconnection of your authenticity and an embodiment of your conditioning of something you're not. That's what depression is, which is going to be a lack of your light. And what is this? Tryptophan, serotonin, melatonin. It's a pathway of your light. Okay. So let's keep going. Now, with neurotransmitter, right, the word neuro means relating. Now, because when quite often in this session option, I'm a big fan of going to Greek, Latin, going to where words originated from, right? Going back as far as we can and a greater understanding of what that word represents, because after a period of time, it gets tainted, right? It's like Chinese whispers, right? The true message is at the start, but once it goes through so many people, let's say through generations, through eons of time, it becomes something else. Everyone puts their little imprint on it, and it becomes completely something else at the end of the line, right? So I like to go back to the ancient original meaning of a word, but secondly, using symbology, symbolism, right? Because I feel like we're going back to its original simplicity, right? And it's very key to do that. So neuro means relating to nerves or the nervous system, right? So this is interesting because when we lose regulation of our nervous system, right, it gets overwhelmed, which everyone does because we're all taught to use mind, thought, mentality, which removes the regulation or balance of the nervous system, which means we live through our nervous system. Then we disconnect ourselves from our light, right? So it's very much connected to this. Now, while the word transmitter, a transmitter is an electronic telecommunications device. Now, this is important. The key word for me is communication, okay? Used for transmitting data. So, actually, I won't jump ahead of myself. And then melatonin, a hormone that regulates sleep, right? So when I got into the chart, my soul consciousness mentioned that, yes, neurotransmitter is the nervous system as a carrier of often the mind's will, right? So it's a communication device, right? The mind constructed the nervous system. And when we look at, like the, human from a Darwinism point of view, often we look at what happened, the cranial size got bigger, right? And the brain got bigger, right? Which now the human perceives as a species that's more intelligent, because intelligence and the way that we define intelligence from mind, thought, mentality, because thought is the mind's domain, is intelligence is based on how someone thinks, right? But that's flawed because that's ego. Okay, right? So, so let's go back to this. Mind constructed nervous system and advanced the cranium. Now, so it could dominate the heart pathway, which means to disconnect you from what you authentically are. Okay. We've got to realize, and let's bring this up, that there are two different pathways at play, right? I always say to my clients that the original conflict and the conflict of the human is that we're discerned through two different pathways. One is more mind, thought, mentality based, and the other one is more heart, feel, knowing based, right? So quite often we get an intuitive, instinctual gut instinct, right? It's there. It doesn't require time for it to come. We get a feeling of what's going on and perhaps what we need to then go and do. But we also have thoughts then come in, right? Because what is felt is ever present. It doesn't arrive. It's the constant. But thought arrives. It always intervenes. It always comes second. That's very important for you to know. Because that tells you that thought is not a constant directly connected to you or your experience. It intervenes to direct you on a certain agendal path. Okay? So often what is thought and what is felt do not align. And that's the conflict. Okay? But we are taught out of mind, thought, mentality is they play for the same team. No, not at all. These are two different intelligences. I quite often like to call what comes through the mind is an intelligence, because intelligence as the human is aligned with thought. What comes through the heart is your soul consciousness. So I say it's a consciousness. And really, intelligence, consciousness really mean the same thing. I just like to use the two different words to differentiate these two different pathways. And a lot of people don't get that. A lot of people in the spirituality, a lot of mediums don't get this. Right? And they're limiting themselves by not knowing this. So this is very important. Right? So when we are living through the nervous system and we're more mind orientated, right? I did a post today about talking about, when I reach out my energy, right? Like I'm using the Force in Star Wars, right? I feel like a Jedi, right? How cool is that? And I'm doing that to a cat or dog that is not even looking at me, right? That their back is facing me. And I start doing that. Within seconds, they turn around. They can feel that. They are aware of my energy and my intentions, and they are feeling it. And cats and dogs and other animals, they are more intuitive and instinctual because they're more connected to their wild instinct. They're not so domesticated. We're the most domesticated. And domestication means conditioned. Because the human is the most mind-orientated species it is. And the more we get dependent on thought, the more we are vulnerable to conditioning and manipulation. That's just how it is. Okay. Now, if I do that same thing to a human, and this is not my clients, because my clients become aware of this, right? Because they're engaged in this sort of thing. But let's say just the general public, if I do that to a human, they don't turn around. They're not aware of it. Why? Because they're not connecting into that intuitive, instinctual, authentic discernment of the field. This is what's not distracting, but this is keeping them distracted, right? From the subtleties of the energy, of the field, of where the cause exists, not just the effect. Okay. Right. So let's go into serotonin. Right. So serotonin is a neurotransmitter involved in regulating mood, appetite, sleep, and pain, right? So sleep because it's the precursor of melatonin. Now, it's interesting with pain because that brings in emotions and mood, which we're talking about balance or imbalance. So when we're emotionally imbalanced, when our mood's imbalanced, which means we're more mind, thought, mentality, we're living through the nervous system, then because pain is an individual thing, okay, and it's based on that individual's perceiving process, okay. So I find that interesting. And as I mentioned, right, about the association with serotonin and depression. Now let's go into this. Now another aspect I looked into was, because we're talking about, originally DMT as an agent for a spiritual psychedelic experience. So I thought, let's look at the word psychedelic and psyche and psych, all these words, right? And let's go back to the origin of that. So psyche, is it? Let's have a look, make sure we get the right one here. Yeah, psyche, right, is, when I looked it up on Google, it says, is the human soul, mind, or spirit. Now, I found that weird because this is quite often connected to what people in the spiritual consciousness community talk about when mind, body, spirit. But there's a lot of gray area there. It's not clear because the mind and the spirit, right, soul, are not the same. As I brought up here, the mind thought pathway facilitates what the mind represents, but the heart feel pathway is what represents the soul. They're two completely different things, right? I often go to the updated version. I go to my clients, instead of saying we're mind, body, spirit, we're not the mind, even though it's in play. We're not the body, even though it's in play. We are infinitely and authentically the spirit, which is the soul. And why I say that is because, let's start with the body. Yes, the body's a vehicle that we utilize for a lifetime, but that's not the end of us. When we move on, the body doesn't come with us. Okay, so that's a very important aspect to make. Yes, where the body has a role, it is a form of discernment in itself because our body is predetermined by our field, right? The field, like we're the goldfish in the goldfish bowl, right? And the field is the water in that goldfish bowl. And for most of us, we can't see that field because our eyes are greatly limited. We see not even close to 1% of reality with our eyes, visible sight. But the role of the body is to experience what we feel through the body as a discernment of what's going on in the field, because we can't see it, but we can feel it through the body. And as I mentioned, Feel is a sense that has no boundary or limitation attached to it. That's why we want to become more familiar to that instead of thought. Thought dumbs things down, limits things, gets you into a state of uncertainty. So therefore you created a fear, which is something that then doesn't sustain you, right? So, that's the role of the body, right? But it's still a tool. It's a vehicle. It's not what you authentically and infinitely are. Okay. And why you want to connect to feel is because the soul communicates feel. So that communication is being communicated through the medium or interface we know as the body. Right? Because our auric field is us, and that's not contained in the body. It goes beyond the body. It's just, it uses the body to express itself through feel. Okay? This is why symptoms are so important. They're not our enemy. We created a modern medical system to get rid of them. Anyway, let's not go down that path. Now, the mind, yes, is in play, but it's to realize that you are authentically the soul. So what the mind represents is not what you are authentically and infinitely. It's in play and it will have its say. It doesn't mean we have to take what it has to say and to embody it as ourselves. But as the human identity is used in a way to manipulate and condition you into the belief that the mind is you. And this is the matrix, the prison world, so to speak. Okay? In Greek, the word psyche word means clear and manifest. Well, that's interesting because what do we do in a session for healing? We do clearings. And what are we here to do? We create and forge reality. Interesting, right? And we create reality, whether the mind's steering our ship or the soul. When the mind generally steers our ship, though, we create more of the things we don't want. When we allow the heart, which facilitates the soul, it creates more of the things we do want. This is why the word desire, right, is the things we really want. It's always associated to what organ? The heart, because the heart knows. That's what you are, okay? Now, the word psychic, right, associated to the word a medium relating to the soul mind. Again, there's a lot of gray area with it. And across the board in spirituality and consciousness, there's a lot of gray area of this. At Trudy Helsa, it can't be any clearer, okay? We don't like gray areas. We don't like people being in uncertainty. We want to present more certainty because out of certainty, you create out of love. And love is your power. Love is what sustains. Okay? The mind forges you more in keeping you in the dark, which means then you create out of fear, which is not what sustains you, but it sustains what the mind is. Okay, that's very important to note as well. Now, with regards to the word psychic, this is interesting. The original word in Latin relates to the soul only, not the mind. So perhaps in the ancients, there was more clarity between what the soul and the mind was. Today, not so much, because the humans are becoming more and more mind-forged, and that's not a good thing. Okay? This is why we're seeing all this AI stuff, because AI is an intelligence. It's the opposite to the soul. The soul's facilitated through the heart. That's your natural intelligence. Artificial intelligence, and artificial intelligence facilitated in the mind, because the mind's not what you are. The mind uses mentality, which uses probability. What is AI all about? Algorithm. What is that? Probability. Same. Okay? Right. So now we're going to go into... I hope you're really enjoying this. It's starting to get a bit long, but let's just stick with me. Now what we're going to go into is... it's this bit here. I'm going through notes here. Okay. Now we're going to go to psychedelic. Okay. Now psychedelic, what Google mentions, is relating to or denoting drugs, especially LSD, that produce hallucinations and apparent expansion of consciousness. Now, remember when they say expansion of consciousness, they don't know, heart, soul or mind. It's a massive gray area. And as I mentioned before, when we use the two different pathways, right, we use to differentiate the two different pathways as the mind intelligence and the heart consciousness. Okay. So again, what my soul had to say was emphasize again what consciousness. Okay. As there is confusion around mind and soul, right? Now, here's an example of my own experience working on someone that had schizophrenia, right? So a lot of extreme schizophrenia, people then experience hallucinations, right? And they'll see it outside of themselves. But what we find in the session is that is a projection of something that originated within. And that person projects it. Now, it then freaks them out and then gets them into fear and gets them up in mind thought mentality, which then just feeds the whole process of schizophrenia and this mental illness, this imbalance. So, of course, that's not the soul projecting, that's the mind. Okay, to keep them in fear, right? To support that person to harm themselves, for example, which that's not supporting them, is it? Right? Now we're going to go into, and I'm just going to show you this, right? This is a cool graphic. That's the nervous system with the eyes attached when it's stripped from the body, right? So when someone passes away and they donate their remains to science and they strip that away, that's what it looks like. Now that looks like an ET, an extraterrestrial, right? And as it's noted there, this creature lives in you and controls everything inside you. Yes, it does if we are mind, thought, mentality forged, meaning we live through our nervous system, and that becomes an extension of the will of the mind, which is the collective, which is hive mind. Okay. Yes, it does. Now, how do we regulate that and keep it in check? We lead from the heart. We don't live through the nervous system. We live through our cardiovascular system. A lot of people go, what do you mean by that? Well, let me just explain that the number one killer of humans for decades, and it hasn't changed, is heart disease. And why that is because we're not using it. We're not using the heart. And when there's that expression, if you don't use it, you lose it. And when we don't use the heart, right, which is facilitate, the heart is your authenticity. It's not there to give away, right? It's your authenticity. So when you lead and use your heart, you feel into your experience, you're bringing through your authenticity, not the conditioning. And that brings in the flow, right, to keep your arteries and veins and capillaries not getting congested, obstructed, and blocked, which is the very thing that takes people out in heart disease. Okay. A lot of people go, oh yeah, we know the heart's a pump. Well, that understanding of the heart a pump, medicine knows that's the baseline of what they know about the heart and the cardiovascular system in science. Is that having an effect on, therefore, us humans not getting heart disease? No. So therefore it's flawed. Okay. All right, let's go to the next one. Now the next one is, let's have a look. Actually, what we're going to do, it's up to 48 minutes. We're going to stop this. We'll have two parts. This is part one. So I hope you really enjoyed this video and the concept that we can dig really deep of greater understanding and knowing and level and how it fits into the bigger picture. If you found this really interesting, please go to my website at trulyholistic.net. Book an appointment for reality coaching. If you want the healing, the clearing work, you can also book an appointment for that. That's all on my appointment page at trulyholistic.net/appointments/ go and check it out for reality coaching or healing session work. You'll love it. Trust me. If you really enjoyed this, you'll love that because it's more in a line for what you need to know. And all of us, our soul is our unique energy signature, and we have a unique path to be made. So when you book that session, you get all this type of stuff, but it's in a line to what you need to know to forge and create your path. So it's a very individualized process. And it's not about, okay, this worked for someone else, this is going to work for you. It's all aligned for you and you alone. So, yes, please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you really enjoyed this. Till next time, catch you later.